Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to be talking about the episode The First Casualty from Season 6. By this point in the series, we're really starting to gear up towards the war in Europe. Kurt gets a letter. He's been called up. He's part of the reserves and they are in need of doctors. He gets assigned to Camp Lee, which is not too far away. They talk about it being about 100 to 140 miles from Walton's Mountain. Of course, I'm none too happy about that. You know, Mary Ellen is fairly newly married and has just had a baby. I mean, the baby is really an infant, so she is quite upset that Kurt's been called up, and don't they know or care that he has a wife and a young child? But Kurt feels like he wants to go be of help, that they need doctors, and he wants to be there. He's torn between wanting to be home with his family and doing what he feels is his duty to help those in need. GW Haines has also signed up. He's home on a furlough, and he is at this point Erin's boyfriend. Interesting, of course, he was originally my boyfriend from pretty much season 1. We first met GW in the episode The Hunt when Mary Ellen is trying to decide whether to buy the catcher's mitt or the dress, because she doesn't know if GW would rather play catch with her or see her in a pretty dress. That is compounded, of course, by her jealousy of Martha Rose Coverdale, who is also trying to get GW's attention. At this point, though, Mary Ellen, of course, has moved on. She's had other boyfriends and is now married. And subsequently, Erin has found that she's involved in a relationship with GW. So she's the one dealing with him heading off to war and feeling responsible. She feels that GW signed up to impress her, and so she is carrying that weight and feeling that GW won't quite answer the question about whether he regrets signing up. So it's a tough one for her to shoulder. When GW heads home, this is all expansive area up around Fraser Park. So the whole Haynes, farm with the horses, and when you see him in the area that he talks about that is going to come to him, his father's land, it's beautiful area, and that was all shot up in Fraser Park, about 90 minutes from the Burbank studios. With Kurt heading off to Camp Lee, my parents show up and say I'm moving back to the house, which I'm happy to do. And for me personally, I was very happy to do that because once I was married to Kurt and moved out of the Walton house, I was less involved in things that were going on. I was in fewer scenes. They had to work to put into scenes and have storylines where I would show up. So for me, I had less to do. So I was very happy when they decided that my character should move back into the house with John Curtis, because it meant that I was more involved on a regular basis in what was happening in and around the house. I do have John Curtis at this point, and there's in dealing with a baby, I've talked about that at times, but you see here as I'm seeing Kurt off at the bus depot, when it is a longer shot and you see the baby's head all covered up, that's a doll. And then when we move into close-ups, you clearly see that it is the actual baby. So there was always that juggling of, do we need to actually see the baby in this shot? And if not, let's pull that blanket up and let's use a doll. It was easier on the infant to only use the infant in scenes where we actually had to see him. And what a cute little infant, twins again, that we used for these episodes. A fun subplot with Yancy Tucker and Sissy. When Yancy decides that he wants to enlist, he's going to go off and join the army and fight the Germans, and there's a whole big parade to see him off. And but before he goes, he and Sissy decide they're going to get married. I've mentioned before that Robert Donner, who played Yancey, and Cissy Wellman, who played Sissy, were married in real life. So here they were, being romantically involved on camera as well. Now Ben, because Yancey is going to go off to enlist, offers to take care of Yancey's pets, all of whom live in his house and sleep in his room with him. Ben's thinking he'll come over to take care of the animals, but Yancey has a whole different idea and figures that all those animals should go to the Walton place. And they do. However, the line is drawn about any of them living in the house, and John agrees that they can all be bedded down outside. And there's here this cute moment of Michael feeding all the little baby piglets. So cute. Here is Yancey and Sissy's Walton ceremony, coming down the aisle and at the altar, and Yancey has a moment when the Reverend asks if there's anybody who has any reason why the two shouldn't be able to marry. He looks around, and cute moment here of John, Ralph, giving Yancey a wink. It'll all be okay. Yancey heads off on the bus after a whole parade of his friends, lead him over to the bus depot. He makes a big dramatic exit, and then finds out that he has been rejected by the Army. He's too old and he has flat feet. So he kind of slinks back into town feeling, rather embarrassed that this happened. But he comes home to find out that Sissy has really cleaned up the place. She's cleaned up after all the animals that were there. She's hung curtains, and Yancey isn't quite sure he's ready for this change in his life. And she also insists that those animals are not sleeping with them. They compromise, and Yancey gets to have the dog sleep under the bed. The episode turns serious and tragic when news comes that GW died in a training accident at Camp Lee, and Kurt is the one who is going to be bringing GW home to be buried. In this circumstance, I'm the one who relays the message to Erin, and it reminded me of Jim Bob is the one who tells me that Kurt was killed at Pearl Harbor, shares that telegram. And then later, right towards the end of the episode, once again, it is up to John, Ralph, to read a letter that was left. In Day of Infamy, he reads a letter that was left with Grandma that Kurt wrote, that he reads. In this case, GW has left a letter with John, and he reads it to Erin. I just reflected on the similarities between this episode and her having to let go of GW, and Day of Infamy when similar things happened when I lost Kurt. The Waltons never shied away from heavy, emotional subject matters, and this was the first time that the war touched the mountain in such a personal way. Sometimes I've been asked why they killed off GW. I think initially, this is just entirely my opinion, that they wanted to start bringing the war closer and having more of its impact on the mountain. And initially, they would not have wanted to kill off one of the Walton men. So GW was someone we were very familiar with. So it was definitely an impact because we knew him, we cared about him. I talk to Kurt about having taught him to dance. So we as a cast had a real connection, and I believe you as an audience did too. And then, of course, they brought it even closer to home when we lost Kurt. But just once again, dealing with the realities of the time and the sacrifices and losses that happened for so many families during the war. That's what I have for you for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, the First Casualty. I'll be back with more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.